Liam, can we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Peters and Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you very much. Declaration of interest? Arshad?
Thank you, Chair. Just item 17, page 53, Send Transport. I do hold contracts with the County Council for Send Transport, okay. So
thank you.
Make a note of that.
Agenda item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of July. Can someone approve them as a correct record?
Graham.
Thank you, Graham. Someone second that? Thank you, Felipe. Thank you. Right. Agenda item 4, addressing the audit backlog. Over to Rachel. Rachel Spain.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. So this is just a very short report brought to you today, just to update the committee on the situation with the audit backlog and the backstop dates. Since the general election, the Minister for Local Government has written out with the intention of putting legislation through Parliament to set these dates into legislation now and make them statutory going forward. So the dates are in the report. I think it's easier to see them written down. It is for me, certainly. So for the unaudited years that we have still outstanding, which are 2021-22 and 2022-23, the backstop date for those years is the 13th of December this year. So that means that by that date, EY must have signed off on those 2 years. The current year, 2023-24, those accounts which are being audited at the moment, the backstop date for that year is the 28th of February 2025. So that means that we've switched to external auditors, so KPMG need to have completed their audit by the end of February next year. So this report is just making members aware of the revised dates, and as a result of the revised dates, it does mean that we need to make a slight tweak to the timetable of meetings. So we need to make sure we've got a meeting close to the end of November in order to facilitate the sign-off from EY on those 2 outstanding years. For the February backstop date for 23-24, we do already, fortunately, have a meeting in the calendars towards the end of February anyway, so that meeting will suffice for that backstop date. So just to raise that with members at this point, that there needs to be a change to the next couple of meetings that are in diaries. Otherwise, I'm happy to take any questions on this area.
First one is, will we meet the November date?
So it's probably Hassan will come on to that in the next item when he presents the VFM report, but as far as I'm concerned, yes.
Thank you, Hassan, for coming today. So it's over to you to give us an update.
Thank you, Chair. So just covering off that first question in terms of the November date. So what we have is we have a team centrally working on audits which are impacted by the disclaim process. So a letter has been sent to all Section 151 officers outlining information requests that we need to receive and then consider in order to discharge our ISA, our responsibilities under international standards on auditing in terms of being able to issue a disclaimed opinion. So there are procedures which we're required to do. So that letter was sent towards the end of August. There was requests for information to be provided by middle of September, and officers have responded to that. So we're aiming to have our audit completion report issued by the end of November in time for that for the scheduled committee, so that we can then meet the backstop date of the 13th of December. So hopefully that answers that question. The what members have in front of you today is our report summarising the work for our value for money responsibilities for the financial years ending March 22 and March 23. As members may be aware, we have a responsibility under the NA's Code of Audit Practice to report by exception on in respect of VFM, and that's in regards to criteria which are the criteria which are defined by the NAO in terms of the areas that we look at on financial sustainability, governance and use of resources, informed decision making. This report covers the work we've undertaken for those 2 years. It outlines on pages 8 and 9 of the report the risks that were identified as part of our planning processes and the procedures that we undertook to address those risks specifically. It also then on your pages 10 and 11 outlines our findings in relation to those risks. So on financial sustainability, haven't identified any significant weaknesses in arrangements. On governance, also haven't identified any significant weaknesses in arrangements. In respect of improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness, we have referred to the Ofsted inspection and the conclusions of that Ofsted inspection, and having considered the findings that reported by Ofsted, concluded they do represent evidence of weaknesses in arrangements in relation to that criteria for which we're responsible. The report also provides within section 2 commentary in relation to the 3 criteria, and also within the appendices for each of the reporting criteria that we are required to consider. It outlines our assessment of the arrangements which the council has in place in relation to those specific criteria. I'll pause there rather than doing a page turner, and happy to take any questions which members may have.
Yeah, thank you for being here today, Hassan. I don't think I've seen that report. Is it in this? Page 10 on mine is we're still in
Something else, yeah.
something very different. Has anyone seen it?
If I can be of assistance, it's the agenda supplement
It's not
document.
right at the back.
No, it came down later.
Separate document.
Oh, have I missed something then? I do apologise. Okay, I haven't even read your report. I'm sorry, for the first time ever. I do apologise. But I just wanted to say thank you for everything that you have done in the past, because I've always been very hard on you, because this is such a frustrating document that it's been coming so late. So I do appreciate that you're trying to get it over the mark for us anyway. I'll pass on to someone else.
Yeah, thank you. The parts that jumped off the page for me are the ones where we've identified the risks on there, and when we're looking at, I think it was a 12.9 million overspend children's services. Send high needs, 1.1 million overspend. We've identified the mitigation that we've put through. How does that continuity take place as we move forwards with these? I appreciate we're looking in the past to some extent, but how do we make sure we're looking in the future? I think it might be a question probably for over here as opposed to for yourself.
I think it's a question for officers in terms of how that's going to be taken forward.
If I can reply, thank you. So those figures obviously are from 22-23, as you correctly said. So when we do the MTFS process, when we undertake that review back of budgets, clearly we identify areas of overspends such as children's services. So in the years since 22-23, bearing in mind there have been 2 financial years since then, we have put additional money into the budget for that service, and that's reflected in the MTFS reports that go through to Cabinet and Council. So it has been addressed from that point of view. From an external audit point of view, obviously we'll have a further VFM report from KPMG that will cover the year 23-24. So if they think that we haven't dealt with that appropriately, that will come through in their report and their opinion.
I think it's fair to say that children's looked after children doubled in that period. So, and that's incredibly expensive outlay for the county. So I just think that I'm surprised that the overspend wasn't more, because our looked after children went from about 980 to 2000. Is it 2000 we've got now, round about that? Yeah. 1400 is it? It's gone down. No, but I thought it had doubled at one stage and then went down. But it's still gone up significantly. Yeah. Well, 980 to 1400 is 420 increase. So, yeah. But I just think that's one of the reasons for the overspend was for that, is what I've been told.
Right, well, thank you, Hassan. And good luck with getting everything concluded for us.
Thank you.
Better news in November.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to again thank the committee for their consideration, and I think it's totally appropriate for you to be challenging us and asking us hard questions. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, so that brings us to agenda item 6, external audit. This is over to you then, Richard, for your verbal report. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, committee. Thanks, Chair. So as it says in the agenda, it's just a verbal update from us at this point in time. So we've got, I suppose, 3 areas of focus. So the first is the financial statements of the authority. So we're currently on site delivering our year-end audit for 23-24 financial year, working closely with Rachel and the team. I think that's progressing well. I think the relationship continues to be working effectively in terms of getting information. We're having some fun and games getting some of the large volume of data out of the ledger, but I think we're navigating our way through that and working with the finance team to make sure that all the reconciliations are in place, which is good. I've caught up with Pete since the last committee as well, which is good to develop that relationship with him as he's new in role. So we're progressing, I think, is probably the status of the audit. Clearly, we're in a little bit of a holding pattern, and I was just talking to Hassan then around the arrangements that we need to follow to allow us to kind of progress the audit. And one of the things that we are required to do is to review their work, and clearly we can't do that until they've concluded. So the PSAA, I think, are managing that arrangement with the predecessor audit firms. So once they're concluded, then we'll be granted access to review their work, which I don't envisage that being a problem. It's a standard process that we go through. We look for their risks and how they've responded, and we work through those. But there are a number of things that we do need to consideration. So NAO, the National Audit Office, have issued a number of guidance notes which are called LARIGs, and they're all around implementing the steps to allow us to kind of rebuild audit. So one of the considerations that we have to take into account is how we're going to do work to fill in any gaps that are left as a result of the previous regimes not necessarily being able to fully conclude the audit processes. So what we want to do is get to a position where we do enough work over opening balances that haven't been previously audited to allow us to ideally lose those disclaimed opinions as soon as possible, because they carry forwards for a number of years until we get that full levels of assurance. So that's something that we're working through nationally in terms of where to focus our effort on those opening balance positions. But I'm sure we'll work through that effectively. The other element is obviously value for money, which Hassan's talked about. I think there's a lot of crossover between their report and where we'll ultimately get to as well, by virtue of the fact that some of the Ofsted results, I think, were actually published in our period of reporting. So we look at the arrangements that are in place from the 1st of April 2023 to the 31st of March 2024, and it's that period explicitly that we're considering. So the areas that you talked about in terms of financial pressures, we're considering those. It's very much around how you respond to those, not necessarily the severity of the issue, and the mitigations that you have in place. Similarly with Ofsted and send arrangements as well. So I think we're down to working through with service heads now where they're up to in considering those arrangements. So that's good. And then finally, from a pension fund perspective, which is probably not everyone's primary area of focus, but I think that audit is pretty much there or thereabouts in terms of substantive work being completed. So the audit team who've looked after the pension fund elements have asked for me to review the work, and I think they believe that they're pretty much complete. So there are 3 strands of work, and I think we're pretty much where we should be in terms of progression.
Thank you, Richard. That'll be able to date. Have we got any questions for Richard? Yanis?
Yeah, just a couple at this point, really. Transferring over standard practice, I suppose, and there are mechanisms, professional clearances and things like that. Are there any concerns that you've seen in the process or the management of the process so far, going between one and the other? And then the second question is, from what you've just said, it sounds like your timeframes, because we know where we are with regard to our previous timeframes, does all look on target for those?
Yeah, if I start with your last question first, the timeframes basically, we will push to try and conclude the audits as soon as possible, but ultimately that backstop means that wherever we get to by the end of February, we have to disclaim our opinions and move on at that point in time. But we're not aiming, we want to issue opinions. I imagine that they will have certain disclaimers included within them by virtue of the fact that, you know, we're dealing with that domino effect of previous gaps, but we will sign off in line with the backstop timelines, yeah, for sure. And then in terms of management recommendations, because of the way we deliver, what we'll do is when we issue our year-end report, which I don't imagine will be in the far too distant future, then we'll include any recommendations that we discuss with Rachel and the team at that point in time. But there's nothing at this point in time where we're going, oh, there's a massive gap within your control environment. We're very much driven by the auditing standards, so we will have some recommendations, but they will be predominantly around how we kind of interact from meeting those audit standard requirements.
Phil?
I'm not sure how to word my question. I'm also not sure whether you answered it there. So, reading the papers, we were given some backstop dates. So, was there anything given with those backstop dates? It feels like I'd like to be a millionaire by January next year. I've got a firm date when I'm going to do it, but I'm not sure it's going to happen. So, the point was that we was given... It seemed solving the problem, reading the papers, excuse me if I'm being too simplistic on this, solving the problem appears to be we'll give the dates to conclude, but without the resource to conclude, then the dates are meaningless. Does my question make sense?
I think so. I think what they've tried to do, though, is I think the process is that it's an unprecedented process. You know, we haven't experienced this previously. So what you've got is effectively a vast majority of local authority accounts aren't concluded for a number of years back, and what the NAO, the FRC, so that the standard setters and the legislature easy for me to say, the people who set the legislation are trying to do is work through a mechanism to allow us to effectively draw a line under those previous audits. And they've come up with this arrangement which introduces these backstop dates, and they have to go through Parliament. Now, they were due to go through Parliament just prior to an election being called, which kind of kiboshed the previous dates, and now they've come up with these, which I think are due to pass Parliament any day now, I think, and they will be put in place. What they effectively mean is that they regardless of whether the firms have the resource, like whether Hassan has the resources in place or not, he has to meet that deadline. So he has to issue you with a modified backstop opinion in November. We have to issue you an opinion by the 28th of February. And basically at every juncture, what we're endeavouring to do is to add a little bit of incremental assurance to the position so that going forwards we will get back to normality. Now, we've approached the 23-24 audit as if these dates weren't in place, and so we're trying our hardest to get to a position where we could sign off the accounts as soon as possible with as little kind of gaps as possible. And I think that that's what we're doing from our side.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think I got the answer, and that wasn't meant to be rude in any way. I think we need to keep an eye on this, Mr. Chairman. As an Audit and Standards Committee, we need to watch this. I think it's good that we have dates, and I guess not necessarily for our council, but for councils in general you were talking about, that there's this massive drift. So I suppose, if anything, the dates stop this drift, and that's probably the conclusion I've come to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got no further questions.
Anybody else got anything else, Richard? Right, thanks very much, Richard, and thanks for the verbal update, and good luck with getting yourself sorted with Ernst Young. So, agenda item 7 is the, I think it's supposed to be Tracy Thorder giving this report on the annual information governance report.
He was just going to get her.
So,
She's there because we're running a little bit to time.
yeah, so that's good. And when you're ready, Tracy, anyway, it's over to you.
I'm conscious of. Oh, okay. I'm conscious of your time, so I'm not proposing to go through the whole report. There's just some areas I just want to highlight, and just to flag. Unfortunately, this is late coming to committee because unfortunately I was in hospital, so I couldn't come to the July committee where it normally would have come. So it is from April 23 to March 24. So I know it's hard because we're talking about last year retrospectively. So the recommendations then is that the committee ask and review and accept the report and its assurances. Acknowledge that the information governance practices are appropriate, current, adhered to consistently, well communicated and under regular surveillance. Note that the report and management of data security incidents and those reported to the Information Commissioner's Office, and then take note of the measures being implemented to enhance especially cyber security, thereby ensuring the protection of our data. So, going through the report then, as it states in paragraph 1, the management of our information assets is paramount for us to be able to deliver the strategic plan, as well as covered under paragraph 3, legislation that we have to abide by. If I jump then to paragraph 5, I just wanted to show that we use a distributed model within the County Council for information governance, so it doesn't just sit with me as data protection officer, it doesn't just sit with the information governance team. We've actually got a multitude of people who hold different roles with regard to data protection, so we work as a collective, but obviously I'm the most accountable person within that. Then moving on to data protection, so I'm just moving on to paragraph 8. As you can see, the subject access requests have increased by sort of 45% from last year, especially within the children's team. So there has been a notable rise of both complex and the sheer volume of requests that we're getting in. So I thought I would just give sort of a quick example there. When I look at the two, when we split them, we've got what we'd call sort of a standard request, and there's been 174 of those, just in children's. But then there's been 183 that are deemed as complex. So that means it's either going to take, there's more agencies involved, there's more information that we've got to gather to be able to respond to the subject access request. And again, a number of these requests have been huge in size. And I have, again, try and give some context. We've had 28 that were over 1,000 documents that an individual's got to read to be able to respond to that subject access request. So I am really pleased, though, even though we've had that increase, the team are staying within time scale. I'm not saying that would continue through this year because, again, looking at this year's data, we've had an even bigger spike in requests. But looking at last year, the team still maintained and made sure we kept up with a sort of 94%, even though they had a huge volume of requests coming through. Moving then on to security incidents. So under paragraph 13, I've just tried to give you again some sort of stats there. So security incidents are where either information's been lost, unauthorised access, etc. We've had a similar number to what we saw the year before. So we had 497 as opposed to 477 the previous year. But if I just move us to paragraph 15, you'll also see that 26 incidents were submitted beyond the 72 hours that we have to respond within. Now, within there were 2 incidents that we had to report to the ICO. However, one of them was direct. The individual went direct to the ICO. On all of ours that we've reported to the ICO. So that number of 2 is just for those that were late reporting within the 72 hours. We've actually had 17 breaches that we've had to report to the ICO, of which 8 of those are third party. So within 16 and 17, I've just tried to give you a bit of a feel of the type of breaches that we've had. However, the ICO's decision for all of ours, but there was no further action to be taken. So they were happy with the investigation we'd done and then the mitigations that we were putting in place to obviously stop it happening again. So moving on then to data sharing. At the moment, we've got, well, as of the 31st of March, we use what's called a data privacy impact assessment, which loads of other local authorities will use, which helps us to be able to make better informed decisions with regard to plans, policies, projects, etc., and making sure we're staying within the law of data protection. Within that, the reporting period, we had 66 that were produced, but we also have what we call data sharing agreements as well, of which 103 of those and that will be with other partner organisations. Another area where we do data sharing is what we call the One Staffordshire Information Protocol, which we've had for a number of years. This isn't a specific, i.e. that data can be shared with there. It's about principles that we'll all abide by. To be able to share that information to make better informed decisions for the greater good of obviously the person who's at the end, whether that be a child, parent, school, etc. And for that has the amount of signatories on there has increased again this year. So we've got 316 Staffordshire organisations that have signed up to the same protocol, that we will all work in the same way. Moving on then to freedom of information. So again, we've seen an increase, but again, we've remained on that ICO target of 90%. We are only obviously 91.8, but I'm really proud again with the sheer volume that we've received, we're still staying within those guidelines. Then moving on to the other types of statutory requests. So moving on to paragraph 24, we receive what we'd call ad hoc requests, and we sort of put those together, categorise those together, and they're requests where we have from the police, etc. The biggest one we've seen, again, we've seen a substantial increase, which we saw last year with regard to probation requests. That was outside of our gift because it was the change in legislation, but the impacts on us because they're requesting more of that information. If I'm really honest, I can see, again, we're going to have a huge spike again this year, and then obviously with the release of people within prison, I can see we're going to get even more as that process embeds better. But, so last year when we saw that there was a spike, 2 additional staff were put in to try and cope with the spike, so moving from sort of 138 up to 880. However, this year we've seen it's gone up to 4,000 requests. These requests are, the statutory timeline for those are very short. They're either 24 hours or 48 hours. So it's not something that we can leave, and it's not something, unfortunately, we can predict. So sometimes we can struggle to meet the timelines because if we've got people on leave, etc., or people off sick, but this becomes the priority for that team because of those timelines. So the data security and protection tool, for those who don't know, this is the tool that's used for us to be able to share information from health information across. So obviously it's used by a lot of our departments within Staffordshire County Council. Again, we submitted our evidence, and again, we were successful to say we met the standards, and obviously now we're going through preparing for the next year as well. Cyber security then, so within this, I just wanted to sort of give you some context of what we've done, but also a few of the incidents that we've I suppose been party to, not at our request, but I'm really sensitive about, obviously this is a public meeting, so I need to be careful about what is shared within there. If anybody wants any further information on this, then please contact me outside of the meeting. More than happy to give more detail or more information of the requests, of the incidents that we've seen. But a few things I'd just highlight is, one, same as last year, email is one of our biggest areas because phishing is becoming so, well, with AI, so much harder to spot. You know, and it's not just us, but we're probably more targeted, and you as councillors are probably more targeted than anybody. So we are seeing a huge increase in that. Last year, we've seen it again this year. We have got measures in place, but they're never as good as us as humans looking at it and thinking, is that real, is that true, and doing some checks before either we click on that link, etc. The cyber security strategy is a 3-year strategy. It's due for renewal next year, but we're starting the planning this year, obviously, to review. If any members do want to give feedback on it, if there are areas you want us to look at, especially from a work planning point of view, be more than happy to have conversations with people and show you the draft, and then again for you to be able to add anything to it that you feel that we've missed within that strategy. I would like to say though, we're working off the back of the National Cyber Security Centre, CAF, so we've joined their pilot this year. We're one of the pilot local authorities who were working with them, because my thought was if we get in at the beginning and we can help to shape it, it also puts us in a stronger position, a more resilient position, which it is. We're reaping a lot of rewards because once you're part of the pilot, there are many checks and balances that they're doing for us as part of that we'd probably have to pay a third party to do on our behalf. Last year, we also put in the working with partners across the integrated care system. We rolled out the security operating centre, so that works 24 hours a day, so it is monitoring our network and obviously the other partners that have been bought into that. We are looking at, okay, working across corporate services, how can we make ourselves as resilient as possible with regard to supply chain? That is one of our biggest risk areas, and it is for any business or local authority. You're only as good as, I suppose, in some ways, your weakest supply chain. So there is a lot of joint working across different areas to make sure we're gaining that assurance when we're commissioning services, because we are commissioning more and more. So obviously that risk, unfortunately, is increasing. But I would say we have got it tight across the different areas to make sure we're asking as many questions as we can to give ourselves that assurance. So from sort of 34 to 36, that just gives you examples of some of the incidents that we've had. And then just to give some assurance around how are we keeping that awareness with people. So we're making sure, as it says in 37, about training for elected members, but also for staff. That is something that is monitored by SLT on a monthly basis as part of the monthly report that goes to them. We're linked in with many different agencies, but we're linked in with the West Midlands Regional Organisation Crime Unit, so ROCU as we call them, where they did a session with both SLT and WLT of what they call criminal minds. So they put you in the mind of the criminal, and it was really informative for us to think how they would think, and again, making sure we've got the checks and balances in place that we need. Accreditation, again, we've got PSN again this year. We're going through it again at the moment for 24-25. And then from sort of 42 to 45, that's just, again, giving you some assurance around the training and making sure that it's proportionate. So we're not forcing everybody through the same set of training. It needs to be proportionate for what they do. And by that, I mean those who don't, school crossing patrols, who never go on our network, we need them to have a certain level of awareness, but they don't need as much awareness, say, as me, who's on the network all the time. And then finally, the surveillance, just to flag, we haven't used the powers that we've got with regard to surveillance. We haven't had to use it this year. And we also had an audit and came back and said that they were satisfied with the measures that we'd got in place, the way that we were either applying or not applying that legislation. And again, they've said that there would be no further inspections this year. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the report, but I thought I'd just highlight a few areas.
Thank you, Tracy. Any questions for Tracy? Graham?
Well, I think I've got 3 questions. I think 2 are probably aimed at John rather than Tracy, but I'll do Tracy's first. Oh, by the way, this is a really, really good report. You know that I take particularly cybersecurity. It's one of my really hot topics, and I think this is great. But going back to paragraph 24, when all these probation, is this people wanting to get information off us about probationers, or?
So it's the police asking us for information, so it could be people who are on probation, they're proposing to, oh sorry, I keep forgetting to put the thing, asking for information about people they might be releasing, etc. So it can be various different types, but it comes via either police, the criminal justice system, or probation themselves. So we just tag it as probation to try and obviously monitor it.
Questions for John. In paragraph 17, there was a breach where birth parents were given information about adoptive parents. Was that handled well? Because I can imagine that would be a quite scary process. And my second question for you, while I'm on, is in the major cyber security breach in September, do we get procurement to review the supply chain where that breach happened? Because I think that's particularly important that we join up the different departments. But thank you very much.
Yeah, I can't answer the first one. I don't know if Tracy's able to answer it. It's a bit probably too detailed for us today without the information on hand. In terms of the cyber breach, yes, we very much did review that particular business that had let us down on that, in that instance. And I think we're now sort of satisfied that our arrangements in terms of those third-party suppliers are better. Probably wouldn't want to say too much more in a public meeting about those, the details of that. I think just on that whole cyber risk, though, I think that the point is people are going to keep trying to get into our systems. And I think the truth is they will succeed on some occasions. On this occasion, there were clearly two breaches, one in the corporate systems, one in the library system. And we can keep tightening our processes up, but there will continue to be vulnerabilities. I think the biggest vulnerability is the 4,500 staff and the 62 members for that matter. I think we're all kind of a vulnerability, and it's just one of those vulnerabilities we can never fully protect ourselves from. So we are constantly on it, constantly upgrading our protection against cyber issues, and that ability to respond quickly when there is a breach, I think is also absolutely critical for us. We've learned a great deal from that cyber incident. Fortunately, it was more of a near miss than a real sort of issue for us, and we have upgraded our processes accordingly. And at some point, if members want a much fuller briefing on all the things we've done that have improved our security, we'd be very happy to give you that, because I think we have done an awful lot of work since then, and our arrangements are much more secure now.
Thanks, Chair. You've mentioned about the increase in the probation requests on there, which are significant and still anticipate to be significant. A question still related with that. You mentioned as well there's 2 more staff that have been recruited to be able to deal with those, but anticipating what's coming through and knowing that you do have those deadlines that you need to work to, is it an area that you can flex staff around in? Are there protocols that you have to make sure are still maintained in doing so? That would be the first question. And then secondly, have you got an insight as to what's also accounted for those significant increases in subject access requests and FOIs separately? And again, how we maintain that ability to try and make sure that we are suitably equipped to be able to respond when things do happen.
So the first question, yes, that's exactly what we're doing about flexing the staff. So as long as they understand the access to information and the legislation and the rules that's what we've done. We are currently reviewing it this year anyway, because again, we look at it every month. We've seen the increase. We're trying to work with probation and the justice system to say, are there any other legislative changes? Because sometimes we don't know until it hits us, and then obviously we're getting the impact of it. What we are looking at is reviewing the whole of that team to say, are there more that can help? The problem we have is the minute they're focusing on that, they're not potentially maybe doing a SOR or an FOI or whatever the other requests are. So it is a bit of a balancing act to make sure that we're responding to the right ones within the right timescales. Obviously, I'm always going to put statutory things first. There are other services that sit within my area as well. So children's have now moved over to mine. So we are looking at merging the 2 teams to try and give a bit more of that flex where we're seeing the spikes and obviously the troughs, which then leads into the SARS. If I'm honest, I think people are getting wiser about they can ask for their information. I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't organisations out there touting it saying, well, we can give you a template for go and ask for your information on X, Y and Z. I also think there are a lot of people who now that are aware that we do hold that type of information, therefore are feeling that they want to ask for it. I think we've got a lot, especially within SEND, if I'm honest. You know, SEND's impacting all of my areas and is impacting everybody again. So it is, we're seeing a lot of requests where people are asking for their information on X, Y and Z, and some of those are really complex. You know, so I think it will continue, if I'm honest. The numbers will rise. We are looking at other ways, so are there digital things that can help us with the process side of things. So hopefully that will mean, because what I don't want to do is keep coming back and saying I need more staff, I need more staff. What I need are the staff that are aware of the person at the end who's making the request and putting themselves in their shoes. That's what I need, their thinking power, rather than spending time putting it onto a system, etc.
I've got a question and a whinge. The question's been partly answered by Tracy. I was a bit concerned about seeing some of the figures and the growth in numbers, because the growth in numbers of things like subject access requests, the probation inquiries, the freedom of information, can be either one of two things. It's either people are getting more wise to these things, as you've just said, and they're becoming more conscious of them, and that the fact that they've got the facility to do those sort of inquiries, or it can be because the service is not working correctly. And my concern about all of these is, how do we know that we're not hiding something that we should really be investigating because it's broken down or because it's not quite working as it is? So that's the question. I think you've partly answered it anyway.
Yeah. So we are aware of that. We do monitor. We do look into why is somebody asking this question, which was probably the piece that I put in. I think not necessarily subject access requests, you wouldn't do this, but we need to be more transparent with some of the information we have got, which will hopefully in time stop the number of FOIs that we're having, because we're seeing that increase. It's increasing because we haven't necessarily published the information for people to find it themselves. So this year, that is something that we're focusing on for those on the transparency pages, to make sure if somebody asked us for it, would we share it? Yes, we would, if it's not personal information. So why don't we just publish it and save ourselves that request and save the person having to request it? That may come back and bite us, because people, the more information we put out, we may get more requests, because people are sitting there wanting to ask a question, unfortunately. So.
Okay. And Chairman, if I can have the whinge, this is probably the wrong place and the wrong time, but I'll make it anyway. I'll quote John's stats about 4,500 employees and 62 members. I think of the 62 members, there's a vast majority of those who don't always have access to their county laptop, and I'm one of those people. I probably spend about 5% of my time on a county laptop and 95% on my home PC or at work PCs, and the security on county systems is diabolical for those of us that are at work. I mean, for instance, I know various people have quoted the 18-character memorable password, which is very difficult when you're working on a number of different PCs, because you don't have any sort of memory of it. And the other thing is, you can't copy-paste within anything when you're working remotely. So if you're in a different PC, you can't even copy-paste in the PC that you're working on. So if you've got somebody's address on an email and you want to copy-paste it into an email, you can't do it. You're not allowed to copy-paste anything whatsoever. I mean, the other things I could go on, and I understand the wrong place, wrong time because of cyber security, why we're not allowed to do certain things. But you can't save a document to your own PC. So if somebody sends something to you and you want to have it on your own PC for next time, guidance on members' award schemes and those sort of things, can't do it. Can't save pictures from anything from civic events or anything. Just, you have to work in a shell, and it's very limiting for members. But that's whinge over.
Tracy, I just want to thank you for a wonderful report here. I think you're doing a marvellous job. I do have just one very small question. Freedom of information, can you ask for that again and again? Or once someone's put in, they can ask again and again? Oh, what a nightmare.
So we do monitor that, because we do have some persistent requesters of information. So they will ask us a question and they don't get the answer they want, or we can't provide it because it could be personal data, etc., they'll then come back and ask the same question but in a different way. But there isn't anything we can do about that because the legislation doesn't cover us.
I do love how you're trying to use the staff in every way to cover these, but do you have a big enough budget to add staff? Because it's obvious legislation's going to keep changing, and I just think how you dealt with 4,000 when you're used to a couple of hundred is just ridiculous, and something had to give. So do you have the extra budget to get the extra staff in?
Obviously, John won't look at me at this point, but no, but John does know. We are, this year, we're putting a pressure forward for this, because what I wanted to just make sure it wasn't just a one-off, a spike, you know, it was actually, no, we know it is consistent, therefore we know we are too thin on the ground going forward to meet the statutory deadlines. Therefore, there is a pressure that's going in this year to the MTFS to say, if it carries on like this, we can't, something's got to give. You're either not going to meet your statutory deadlines, which you really don't want to do, or we're going after invest. However, John will know I'm quite creative with my budget in the sense of I've got 7 services, so I have got some flex in the sense of if one area has got vacancies, I can push those funds to others to get temporary staff in. But I think we're getting to a point now where we know this is the new norm, I guess.
And good luck with all these freedom of information requests. So right, so that brings us to agenda item 8, the National Fraud Initiative. Over to you, Debbie. Give us an update.
Thank you, Chair. So this is just a short report just to make members aware of the forthcoming National Fraud Initiative 2024 exercise that's due to commence shortly. So on page 31 of your pack, this provides a bit more background information in relation to that exercise. So it is run by the Cabinet Office. It happens every 2 years, and it's been running since 1996. As an organisation, we have found it really worthwhile because it has detected largely errors, in fairness, but it allows us to put our systems right in terms of data as and when we find potential matches. So on page 32, so turning over, this just sets out the notification process. So as you would expect, we are obliged to inform individuals that we are sharing data as part of this exercise, and we do that in a number of ways. There's various communications that we send out across the organisation and to our pensioners. There's also information held on our council's intranet, and there's various links also to the Cabinet Office as well. So in terms of the data that we submit, that will take place later on in October. We submit payroll data, pensions payroll, trade creditors, blue badge data and various transport passes. Since March 2020, we haven't included direct payments or residential home care data because that was classified as patient data. The Cabinet Office have said that they're hoping to try and reinstate that as part of the 2024 exercise, but we do await just further information there. However, to compensate that, you'll probably recall in the outturn report over the last few years, we do undertake our own internal exercise using the Tell Us Once data to match deceased data to our residential care home data and direct payments. So we have plugged that gap, but hopefully the Cabinet Office will reinstate this data for this latest exercise. So on page 33, that just sets out some more information in terms of the sort of data matches that we will get returned to us. So for example, payroll data, we use that to potentially highlight where somebody could be working at 2 different organisations, one where maybe they're on sick leave, maybe with us, and working at another organisation. And also we use data as well to ensure that those individuals that are working for us have got the correct permissions and permits to work within our organisation. Trade creditor data as well we match for duplicates, and we also check employees to ensure that we're not paying employees that are also directors of companies, or if we do, the right transparency and reporting has taken place. So, Chair, that's all that I needed to sort of say on this exercise, but I'm happy to take any comments or queries.
Any questions? Colin?
I'm glad you mentioned Tell Us Once, because that was a new idea created by Lichfield District Council many years ago, and I was involved with the Cabinet at the time. It was a forerunner that has become a national thing now, that people benefit by only having to give information once to public bodies. And I think this is another example where there's an opportunity, because of data sharing, that people trust public bodies more than they would maybe even their bank or their telephone company. So I think we should do whatever we can to work with the Cabinet Office to get as much information as possible that allows some of these investigations to be improved. So fully much in favour of it.
Right, thank you. You want to say anything? Nice. You looked as if you wanted to.
It was just to support the same. I think the involvement in it gives us far more advantages and benefits than not, and I think that that's a good investment considering the scope. Just in the fact that blue badges, I think, is in there. And I think we issue something like 53,000 blue badges from Staffordshire County. So I think that exercise in itself would be beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Dr. Debbie. We'll move on now to, I think Kate's not here, so I think Chris has got the short straw. Is that right, Chris? Over to you then, Chris, of the review of the Constitution.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, councillors. Short and sweet on this one. I can't believe where the time's gone, but it was approximately 4 years ago when a similar report was brought before this committee. As the report states, regular changes are made to the Constitution at all times, obviously in response to any changes in legislation. But it's best practice to do a wholesale review every now and again. So it feels like 4 years is about right, sort of to be in the cycle of council administrations as well. So similar to last time, requesting of this committee to have volunteers of members to form a working group to run through the Constitution and then report any recommendations back to council. So back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Does someone would like to approve the recommendation? Move approval? Right, Phil and Caroline. Okay, thank you very much.
Could have some volunteers to form part of a working group, or if you want to take that offline. But if people want sort of to come to me, that's either way is fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do it now.
Do it now.
Volunteers.
Mr. Chairman, I did last time and surprisingly thoroughly enjoyed it, so I'd like to do it again.
Glad to hear it.
So we have 5. Yeah. Right, so
we've got Phil.
Right, so we've got Phil, we've got Mike, Caroline, Janice.
Can I just request if it's likely to be a Teams meeting? It was last time. If it's a Teams meeting, happy to be involved in that one. Thank you.
Right. Colin, you the same?
So we've got, who wants 5?
Yeah.
There's
Graham?
Phil, me, you, Janice. We only need one more.
One more. One more volunteer. Yeah. No.
No, it's going to be on Teams.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. Okay, with that, don't worry.
So you've got Janice, Phil, Graham, myself and the chair.
Okay.
We don't know yet.
We don't know yet, Graham. We'll keep you informed. Anyway, thanks very much anyway, Chris. Thank you. Right, over to you then, Lisa, now, for the forward plan for Audit and Standards Committee, agenda item 10. Is your computer working?
It is, yes. Thank you, Chairman. Before you have the standard report outlining our work programme for the remaining meetings of this particular cycle, I refer back to an earlier point in respect of the proposed changes that will need to take place with regard to the timing of both the 5th of November and the 10th of December Audit and Standards Committee. Liam hopefully has got that all in hand in terms of writing out and obtaining that additional meeting within November, the last week in November. That will allow us to meet the backstop dates required for EY. So that will mean some amalgamation of agenda items from what you've got actually within the papers that have been circulated. So potentially the 5th of November and 10th of December meeting will be merged and will take place in November, subject to availability and confirmation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for... Say there isn't. Thank you very much, Lisa. So before we go on to excluding the public, does anyone want to break for have a refresh there? Go for tea? Well, we'll have a 10-minute break then, okay, before we start. Oh, sorry, Liam. Oh, right, I'll read the paragraph 4 then, right. That the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business which involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the paragraph of Part 1 of Schedule 12A as amended of the Local Government Act 1972 as indicated below. Thank you. Thank you, William, for coming.